All right, next item, next presentation, small lot septic and sanitary sewer presentation. This will be Engineer Nelson, joined with from Scott County, Kate Solacek and Mary Von Eschlin. If you guys want to use the microphone at the podium there when it comes to your part, but Shane, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll kick off the first few slides. So tonight we just wanted to talk to council about what we call our small lots, and what we mean by small lots is they're not our standard 2.5 acre lots.
Yeah, we're just gonna record this one separately.
Oh.
We can refer back to it separate. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're talking about our small lots, we're talking about lots that are not 2.5 acres in size. Generally, they're not large enough for current standards to be considered to have alternate septic sites in that. We're going to talk a little bit, try to answer some questions and talk about that as well as an option for extending sanitary sewer to those lots. So we're talking about basically 4 neighborhoods, and they're highlighted in yellow on the in this exhibit. And so generally it's a Country Court neighborhood, the Creekwood neighborhood, Whitewood and Birch, and West Side Drive, and then we call the Casey neighborhood. So it makes up approximately 500 homes. Go to the next slide. And then now we're just zoomed in on, this is the Country Court neighborhood, just so you can kind of get a better feel for the lot arrangement. This is the Casey Edition neighborhood. And then this is the West Side Drive and Whitewood and Birch neighborhood. And then lastly, the Creekwood neighborhood. So those are really what we're talking about when we're talking about the small lots. So a little bit of background. So these lots were originally subdivided back in the 1960s and 1970s. And from all the investigation that we've done, staff feels that that was kind of originally the expectation, or maybe always assumed that at some point these lots would connect to sanitary sewer. So there's actually a couple of newspaper clips on this slide. The first newspaper clip says, Fire Lake also announced at a hearing last week that is no longer interested in annexing any part of Credit River Township. Of course, the reason for annexing Credit River Township would be to provide sanitary sewer service. So that tells us that Prior Lake was thinking about annexing a portion of Credit River back in 1968. Then there's a letter from a resident back in 1974. I'll just read that quickly. Dear Town Board of Credit River, I'm not interested in paving our road at this time. In a few years after sewer and water are installed, I would like to road pave. So here we are, well, 50 years later, still don't have sewer and water. And again, this is just for some context. There's not a lot of records back when these lots were originally subdivided, but there was also a paper handed out or at your table tonight that Chris actually just recently found.
You probably weren't born.
Yeah, I was born in 76.
Yeah, in July of 68. If they said that they weren't going to annex us in 68, why do you think we continued to build homes on small lots as opposed to building them on 2.5 acre lots or above?
Yeah, Mr. Marker, Councilmember Marker, I think the answer to that is I think at that time they just thought sewer and water would be available and that it would be affordable. That's really what I think the premise was back at that.
Okay. When did we stop doing the small lots then? Like, would that have been in the 70s?
I don't know.
No,
No, it would have been later than that because West Side Drive was subdivided in the 90s, wasn't it? Late 80s,
Yeah,
mid 80s.
93 were 2.5 acre lots.
Yeah.
okay. Sorry to interrupt.
Or actually, then it was 5 acre, and then there was a moratorium for a year, and then they went to 2.5. So
And the other point on this slide was, as far as septic regulations at the time, which I think this is really fascinating, there really were none. There were no county septic regulations, and there also were no state regulations. That's surprising to me to know that.
The good old days.
Yeah, right.
Just kidding.
And what we understand is a lot of homeowners at the time, because there were no regulations, installed cesspools. And if we go to the next slide, this is just kind of a schematic of what a cesspool looks like. And this might also be a good time for me to turn it over to Mary or Kate to explain a little bit about possible environmental concerns.
So cesspools are just kind of something that they did in the smaller lots because it was just a tank and they dug a hole and put blocks around it, so they're not watertight. There's usually no bottom or anything like that, and they didn't take up a lot of room. So those small lots, that's what they worked for, but they found within like 10 years that people were adding drain fields or another cesspool onto them just because they couldn't handle the wastewater from the house. Next slide. So this is a map of the current septic systems in those neighborhoods. The yellow ones are septics that are over 30 years old, I believe, right? 30,
That's
Yeah.
what it says.
yeah, 30. And the ones that are red are the ones that we know that have a notice of non-compliance. So there was a compliance inspection done already. So next slide.
Are any of those red dots health concerns?
No, not imminent health.
Okay.
So those we take a little more serious and those we tend to look at, and if they're backing up, that things get fixed.
Can I ask another question? The red dots then, have those property owners been notified, and do they have a plan to replace or?
So
what?
they've been notified, so whenever we get a compliance inspection in at the county, we send them a letter giving them a time frame to replace by. So,
Okay,
and this one is just a little zoomed in of country court of what they are for the ones that are over 30 and the ones that have notice of non-compliance is on their property already.
So at this time, there are 5 lots
Oh.
in country court that are known to be non-compliant.
Yes, that we have documentation that there was an inspection done. That failed. And this one is just another 5 years. So this one's at 2030. So these are, you say, a lot of the yellow dots, or they were green before, now went to yellow just because they're older. So septic systems age out, and they're now past their 30-year life expectancy. That would be in the 2030. So it's just planning it.
Can I ask a question real quickly? On the previous slide where you showed the 5 that were non-compliant,
Mhm.
the yellow does say it's before 2020 or 2000, right? So that's only 25 years first fall. But when we talk about the lots that do not have a yellow dot, does that mean that they are?
They have newer septic systems on them. So they're not past that 25 years.
Okay, and we don't have a blown up map to show that where those, it's really difficult on the next slide to see, are they, so like, I don't know, I can't even describe where I'm talking in the bottom of Sewell Lane on the corner there, that is not a yellow dot on the next slide. So we can make some assumptions, but do we have data that shows when a septic system was actually installed?
Yes, we have all the records of when they were installed. Some of them are a little, the older ones, it's usually just the date that the house was constructed. Because we didn't have any regulations, there was no permits usually.
I have one question on these older developments. Usually when they want to put an addition on or add a garage on or whatever, then their septic systems are
Yes.
found to be out of compliance.
Yes, so we require anytime there's a
Yep.
horizontal addition or garage or anything like that to a house, we require a compliance inspection to be done. If it's an older system, if it's a newer system and we have good records and they're meeting setbacks, then we don't request one.
Thank you.
A point of clarification here. Where we're showing a red dot, would you please identify or define non-compliant? I mean, this could be that it is a cesspool. Or
It could be, yes.
it could be as simple as it doesn't have a proper lid on it. It didn't pass the inspection by the pumper.
No,
correct?
this is
Or
a
do you have to-
compliance inspector that came out and
Okay.
did a full inspection. MTCA has inspection sheets, so they look at the tanks and the drain field. So they did an inspection. If it was simply a tank lid was cracked, those usually get fixed and they're noted right away in the compliance inspection.
So the five, and say just in country court, 5 red dot. Could be as simple as being accessible.
It could be accessible, yep.
And I'm kind of familiar with some of the ones where they don't show one, and I know that those have newer mound systems installed. Or new systems that were installed since 2000. I'm also looking at some of these other ones, the yellow ones. It doesn't necessarily mean that in a period of time, by 2030, et cetera, that they would be a non-compliant system as long as it's working.
Yeah, that's just their age now, so they're getting
Right.
past that 30 to 40 years, so their life expectancy is coming to an end.
Because I've read that as long as you maintain it properly, it can last 50, 60 years. It all depends
It all
on a lot of
depends on how
different
you treat your
factors.
system and if
Yes.
you're maintaining it and stuff. Yep.
If I was one of those yellow dots, but then I corrected something or I installed a new system, would my yellow dot go away then?
Yeah, we just made these maps for you guys to look at to see the difference of age. So these systems are getting older as we go on. So
So
Um,
this isn't the original one. This is the most recent system that's been installed. So if I replace my original system with a new one and it's only 10 years old, that there won't be a yellow
there wouldn't
dot.
be a yellow dot. No.
Okay,
There's-
okay.
Yeah.
That explains.
got it. Okay.
Yeah, and Bill, just to expand on that, I mean, I think the point of these maps is just to show that the systems are getting older and this slide. There was 200 dots that were green that turned to yellow, so. It's kind of like our roads or any other infrastructure. Their age is just one of the factors that we have to be aware of, and over time, these systems will
Start to fail.
start to.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So just a question on that, you talk about green dots, where are green dots? Cause I don't see any green dots.
We took the green dots because it got too cluttered in
Okay.
there with them. So they don't have a dot on
And this is 5 years from now, so we're 2030.
30, yes. 2030, yep.
Excellent.
So the county, we came up with our ordinance in 1981 when there was no state code. State code didn't come in effect until 1996 when they made Minnesota Rule Chapter 7080. So that's what we go after. Now they updated it so that's Chapter 7080 through 83. So they broke the big one up into 4 smaller chapters. So what are septic systems? It's just little basic, they treat our wastewater on site. Many homes, especially when you live out in the country, when municipal wastewater is not available, you have a septic system and they usually consist of tanks, pump tanks, and your drain field. They just safely, if they're installed correctly and they're at the right separation, they recycle the water back into the environment, which is a big thing. So about 30% of households in the state are on septic systems. And here in Scott County, we have about 9,100 systems. And then they can last usually to 30, 40 years with proper maintenance, and maintenance is usually pumping your tank and making sure you're not having vegetation grow in your drain fields, such as large trees or anything with deep ruts. So and there is 5 different types of septic systems out there. Type 1s are your standard systems. They're mounds, trenches, at grades. These are the ones that have good soils. They're not undisturbed or anything like that. So for new homes, we go for this. So when we're doing any plats or anything like that, we require 2 type 1 sites to be found. Type 2s are holding tanks. If you have a holding tank and you're a resident, and if that's your only option, there will be operating permits that you'll have to do with the county for the life of the system. We have 2 of them in the county just because there's no room on their lot for a drain with setbacks. Type 3s are the ones that lack that 12 inches of separation. They're undisturbed or filled soil. Will require monitoring for 3 years just to make sure the system is acting and doing what it's supposed to. Type 4s are the ones that have pre-treatment. They're usually for high strength waste. Reduce lot size if you don't have room on your lot. we would do this. This one also will have an operating permit with the county for the life of the system. Type fives are the same as type fours, but they're done by engineers. There might be some standards that are changed, the engineer changes that are not approved by the state, but as an engineer, they can do that.
Question?
Mhm.
Is it fair to say that on any property, you could put one of these 5 on there? If one doesn't work, you could do 2, or are there some properties where none of these are gonna work after the initial?
It's very
one,
rare, but usually can get one of those types on. Type
Okay.
2 would probably be your last as
Which
a
is
holding tank.
the holding tank?
Yeah.
Okay. And are holding tanks reasonable for a lot? You know, that's less than a half an acre or half acre.
The cost of everything over the years is a way more than trying to just put a drain field in.
Is it?
Yeah, because you're pumping. So whatever water goes down your drain goes to that holding tank and then you have to
Right.
pay to get it pumped out. So,
And when you go out, when the county goes out and does the inspection and it fails, do you give the homeowners an opportunity to know all about these different varieties? Or do you
So-
is it the homeowner's responsibility to figure all that out themselves?
no, so we don't do the inspections. We do them when they're replaced. Like if someone comes in for
Okay.
a permit, we'll do those inspections. But if someone, let's say they need a compliance inspection for a garage permit.
Yeah.
They will hire a septic, inspector to do that.
Okay,
So, and then if it deems failing, then they'll probably go, if they're also a designer, then you talk to a septic designer and they would look at these different.
they would,
types of-
not the county. Okay, all right, thank you.
And if the home goes up for sale, you need.
You need
septic
a,
inspection.
yeah,
That's usually when they catch it.
Next slide.
those,
So-
those homes in red then, could they be sold today?
They can be, yes. So that transfers, that date transfers.
Okay.
It stays with the property. It's not with the property owner.
Okay.
So mounds, these are just the different types of drain fields. You kind of all know what mounds are. Everyone sees them. It's usually just, we scarify the soil on the top, we place sand, then it's our rock and then our piping and more rock and fabric that goes over the top of that. And then it's, just, cover material, just usually 18 inches.
What's the red flashing light for that? Is that like a big use? Have you, all the ones I see have a red flashing light that goes off once in a while on the top of the mold.
On the top of them, no.
It's a warning light for some, get
Probably
your
a
thing
tank
fixed.
alarm.
Something's
Oh,
wrong.
It's the pump tank alarm. Yes, so that means there's probably something, there's alarm going off, the pump's going out and it's reaching a high level. So,
Okay.
And you got 48 hours to do something or it might. go
well,
over.
it depends on how much room is left in the
Right.
pump tank. So,
Right.
so acrates are like mounds, there's just no sand involved in them. And we still do trenches today that are in ground. And then we have pressure beds and seepage beds, which are just kind of dug into the ground with piping and rock. So, and this is just a cross section of what a mound looks like on the inside. And there's one that was installed. You can kind of see the fabrics in on top and then they'll cover that all with topsoil so grass can grow on it. And then trenches, same thing. And then that's like a picture of a pressure bed going in. So they have inspection pipes at 4 corners and they'll do clean outs and stuff too on them. So when are compliance inspections required? We kind of touched on it. Anytime they're applying for a building permit, horizontal addition, bedroom addition, things like that, change in use of a property. So if it's a CUP or IUP that comes in, we review the records too and determine if a compliance inspection is needed. Especially for, anytime subdivisions or plats going on, developments, variants and stuff, we all look at that. But compliance inspections are not required for property transfer in Scott County. We have never done it, but a lot of lending agents require it nowadays. They want to make sure they're lending money on something that's not failing. So we get a lot of those.
Mary, maybe I can just
Mhm.
ask a question or so. It's compliance inspections, they generally only happen when somebody's doing an addition or if the buyer requests one.
Yeah.
Does the county keep records of like say out of that country court neighborhood, how many compliance inspections have been performed? And like, would you have a, just kind of a, not an exact number, but you think like 20% maybe of those homes have had a compliance inspection in the last 10 years? Not even 20%?
I don't know, we get about 200 to 300 compliance inspections in a year.
Okay.
So how, about 30% fail and about 70% pass. So we have records on all of them that are done. I just,
Every 3 years we get a yellow card.
yes, that's for pumping.
For pumping.
That's reminding
And
to,
then your tank is inspected.
well, yep, they pump it out just to
Yeah.
make sure everything's out and
Mhm.
stuff. So it's just a reminder. Met Council lets us make sure that we have that program. So to remind people to keep maintaining their tanks. So.
Mhm.
Can I ask a question? I thought I heard that you said they only had. You said 30 fail and 30% fail, 70%. What was the total number that you get in a year?
We get usually around 200 to 300 compliance inspections in for the year, and that's for the whole county.
But that doesn't. But for the pumping every 3 years, doesn't every pump have an inspection also?
No, a compliance inspection is something different. That is, they're looking at the whole system. They're looking, now compliance inspections require the tanks to be pumped at the time of inspection so that inspector can go in and look to make sure there's no cracks in the tanks, things like that, baffles are on. And then they look at your drain field also to make sure that's in compliance. Pumping is just a maintenance thing. The pumpers do look in it to make sure, okay, is the baffle still on there and things like that. They do check that stuff.
I thought they report that to the county too, that
Yes,
it was
they
done.
do a pump permit to us and
Okay.
then we enter it in so that stays on that record. So if you haven't pumped in 4 years, that's how you get a card. Yellow card. So, and then this is just our time frame for replacement. So areas of high susceptibility and wellhead protection. If it's an imminent health threat, that doesn't change. It's 10 months no matter where you're at located in the county. If you have an unsealed tank or a seepage pit or a cesspool, that is still 10 months. And then if it's just a separation issue with your drain field, then it's 3 years. Areas of moderate susceptibility or shoreland areas, same thing with imminent health threats is 10 months. If you have an unsealed tank is 3 years and separation is 5. And if you're in the low susceptibility area, imminent health threat is still 10 months, unsealed tank is 5 and separation is 10. And the next slide will kind of go over. So the yellow area is the moderate susceptibility area, which kind of encumbers all of these developments. So if a compliance inspection comes in, that would be the time frame. This is the wellhead protection area, get a little of that white wood and birch area. That would be just like it would be at high susceptibility. So this area is susceptible to groundwater contamination. So we look at that for complaints.
Can I ask a quick question on that previous slide?
Mhm.
That middle column calls out seepage pit, is that the same as a cesspool?
Yes,
If we know that there's cesspools in Country Court, why haven't they been replaced in 5 years?
because we haven't received a compliance inspection on them. So we don't do any unless there's a compliance inspection.
Counselor Zantos, that's kind of what I was getting at with my last question. And that's something that, you know, we just don't have a really good idea, like, we don't have an inventory of all the septic systems and how they're functioning. The only time that the county receives that inspection is when either when like an addition is proposed to expand the footprint, or if there's a sale and it's part of the you know, like the buyer's requirement for the
Terms of
sale.
Okay, let me ask it a different way then. We know that there's 5 non-compliant in Country Court. Do we know what those non-compliances are in West Country Court, and is one of those a cesspool? And if so, why is that fixed?
I would assume maybe they're cesspools. I don't know. I can't. 9,000 septic systems in the
In
county. I know.
In the case there is a cesspool. and
Yes.
It was found 6 years ago. What's Scott County do about that to make sure that it's followed?
So Kate's a logic, as we mentioned.
Kate, would you, because no one's gonna hear you on.
So Kate Logic, I'm the Scott County Environmental Services Manager. So I think maybe I understand. So yes, we know that there may be cesspools out in this area. And now if we had, for those that have done a compliance inspection, yes, Mary could go back and she could tell you which one of those failed and what they failed for, if it was a cesspool or a drain field. So why isn't the county required replacement? That's one of the reasons why we're here tonight. So we, in our ordinance, Mary will cover this, we offer an extension of 5 years for those people that we think are going to be getting city sewer. So we've been patiently waiting with these homeowners for either a city sewer connection, or if nothing happens, we're going to make them replace.
Okay.
So we're just patiently waiting with them. But we will,
And how do you
we will
enforce-
at some point have to get a hold of them and say, the time is up.
Question.
How do you go, how do you enforce?
We have all of that coming.
Yes,
Oh,
yeah,
Take
we'll
it
go.
from there.
Yes,
Should,
so,
should we do an inventory of country court each house and do an inspection to see whether they're in the 10 months, the 3 years, or the 5 years? Or even 10 years? Or the last column? What do cities do? Or do they just say, we're just gonna bring in sewer? Because we have a bunch of yellow dots on our map.
so
Right.
we'll go through, can you hit the next slide?
Let's finish the presentation and
Okay.
take the questions till the end.
So we have not, every city has septic systems still in it. We govern all the septic systems throughout the county, no matter if it's in the city or not. So we do have some that are, within, that are, probably past due or close to being past due.
Okay.
And city sewer is there. They said they are coming, and there's a letter from the city saying, no, we're project, we will hold off. We give them a 5-year extension until that comes, because we don't want that homeowner spending money to replace the system, and then the city is gonna make them hook up to their pipe. So we like to work with them about that. So if they're, and they usually, we send letters, reminder letters to all the ones that have notice of non-compliance. We send them every spring, throughout the year, letting people know that, hey, your due date is coming up. It's time to think about replacement. Get a hold of a contractor. We send them letters, send them a contractor list. We do that. And they usually will call me. So the ones that don't do anything, so we have some that ignore us for years and don't do anything and they're past due. We send a couple notice violations. Once that doesn't go, then it goes to court. Then we send it over for prosecution, because you're way past due. So we're more, we understand when we have wet years, septic slow down. It's hard to get systems in, and contractors have to catch up. So there's some years that they're not able to get caught up. So we're usually give homeowners another year extension as long as they're talking to us. So. But if they're imminent health threats, we want those fixed. So those are the big things that are backing up in the yard, or backing up in their home, or they're surfacing in their yard or anything like that. So. And then, so on-site replacement challenges. So this is kind of why we're here. Country court and all these with the small lots and stuff, it's really hard to place septic systems on them today. They usually have reduced drain field sizes, things like that, just to fit in. So there's setbacks that go with everything. Wells, there's 50-foot setback to wells. If they have 50 feet of casing, that's for any part of the septic system, tanks and drain field included. Now, if they have, less than 50 feet of casing or shallow wells, then that gets moved to 100 feet setback. And then buildings, tanks are 10 feet, drain fields are 20 feet setbacks, and then you have your property lines, which is a 10-foot setback. Easements, so a lot of these little subdivisions have 5-foot drainage and utility easements on the property lines, are 10 feet. There's no setback to them, but the septic system can't be located in that area unless there's approval from the easement holder. So then there's also things with power line and gas lines that run in people's, because they have to dig up that line, then they're digging up their septic. And then landscaping and things like that. So people have nice landscapes and trees and stuff. So sometimes the only place to put a septic system is where your nice big tree is. So.
And Mary, you take into consideration the neighbor's lot.
Yes,
So
yes.
you're not.
Yeah, so when you have all these small lots, when there's wells in front yards and wells in backyards, then you're trying to figure out setbacks and everything.
Yeah.
So we can change to the next slide and kind of have a drawing of how this all goes. So these are kind of the size of the lots of country court, and you can kind of see there isn't a lot of room once you get the setbacks on there. So the orange line is the 10-foot setback for a tank. And the 20-foot, the green line is the 20-foot for the structural setback. And then the 50-foot well setbacks. So there isn't a lot of room to replace. And we prefer not to replace over the existing septic system just because that site has been used now for 30 to 40 years or 50 years. So taking on another 50 years of wastewater, we don't know if that's the best thing for it.
Now that red square in the corner would be the 4,000 square feet
Yes.
minimum required, right?
So that's a typical size for a 4-bedroom house is 4,000 square feet. So trying to fit that on some of that with setbacks, it's a little difficult on these smaller lots.
What you just said about you can't put it on top of the old system, you can't dig out the contaminated soil and put in sand or put in some new soil? Or you,
It depends on the soil type you have, like sandier
That's
soils,
cool.
maybe. You could do that with, but some of the heavier clays and stuff, it's better just to leave it in place and build above it. So you'll have to so if you place now let's say a mound on top of an old trench system, you have to be 3 feet above where the top of that old trench is.
Okay.
So building up is a lot, can cost a lot. So those would be like your type 3 systems where you're building over new ones or over old systems. So these are just some prices that we put together of what the typical cost of a basic septic system for type 1s. And everything is based on information that we get from permits that come in, and I do the loan program through the county and stuff. So we see those that come in, but those are replacement systems. I see a lot of that money. So type 1's the basic right now. These are going off of last year's. We haven't seen really a lot of this year's prices of how things are going to cost. Typically, type 1's are between 18 and 30,000. Type 2's holding tanks, typical install is only 10,000. But as you go on, that fee grows and grows every year, how much that system actually costs you because you're paying so much for pumping every month or every 2 weeks, things like that. Type 3's are not your basic ones, so they're around 20 to 40, and that depends on how much material is needed, how they can get there and things like that for sizing and stuff. And then there's I said monitoring for 3 years of the county. Then type 4's and 5's are those pre-treatment ones. So they cost a lot more money. With those, there is service providers that they'll have to have for the life of the system. So there's testing that goes on quarterly, monthly, depends on what type of system is and what it's used for. And then that's that operating permit with the county. And those fees can range depending on the size of the system between $270 to $750 a year just for us to have that operating permit.
does the county have all these different types? Do you know?
We
Like, do property
do.
owners have all?
Yes,
Yeah.
we do actually. Type 4, they're usually 4's and 5's are on our bigger businesses.
Business.
Yes, with high strength waste, Horse and Hunt, Doherty's, things like that.
There's a type 4 in Credit River, by the way, Casey's edition.
Yes, we do have one. Yes, in Casey's
Hmm.
edition, they put that in
Mhm.
that last year. Yeah, so that one is a small lot, wells in the center of the backyard. So, and they kind of just dug up and they had 2 cesspools and they kind of went off to the side and did pre-treatment and UV treatments too. So to reduce separation.
Is it working well? Do you know?
He's got some bumps in it. I get the monitoring reports every year. So the numbers, I think he's got it figured out. Hopefully they're a tricky thing to know how long for pumping and settling in the tanks and how long to run their aeration units that are in there. And then if the UV light is working properly and things like that. So if a UV light goes out, that doesn't kill the bacteria. So. And there. Okay, I am done talking.
Now we get to the question part.
Yeah, so we have a question for.
But hang on, Shane
Okay.
still has some slides here.
Yeah, so, Mayor and Council, so then the question is, what options, if any, could the city offer? Or are we in a position to provide to our residents? And the one option that's most commonly provided by the city is city sewer. And this next slide is just an example of another area in the county. This is actually in Savage, called Woden's Acres. And this was first platted in 1956, same thing, it was, smaller lots. Originally, are serviced with septic systems, and municipal services were extended there in the early 2000s to provide a solution for those residents. Right. So just a little bit about sewer sizing. So sewer sizing is really dependent on land use. Generally, if you have, quarter acre lots, or larger, something like that, that's gonna generate one wastewater flow. If you have a bunch of apartments and townhomes, maybe commercial buildings, that's gonna generate a lot more wastewater. So really, our any city's sewer sizing is really driven by the land use. And when sewer lines are sized, they're sized for ultimate development. So that's, the comp plan process. We have our last comp plan, which didn't really have a future land use map, but it had a build out map, which was kind of at the time, the city's best guess of what the future land use might look like. And we'll be going into that process again soon. And if there's a bunch of changes to proposed land use, that might change, or that would change the size of sewer pipes that would be needed to support that development. So just quickly on trunk sewer line versus lateral. So trunk lines are generally bigger and deeper. So generally anything larger than an 8-inch sewer line is considered a lateral or a trunk line. So 10 inches or larger would be considered trunk. And sewer trunk lines can be installed sometimes up to 30 feet deep. Lateral lines are generally smaller and shallower. So generally they're 8-inch sewer pipes. It could be 6 inches, but then they range in the depth of 8 to 15 feet. And when we look at trunk lift stations, the difference between a trunk lift station and just a local lift station is a trunk lift station will be sized to provide sewer service to future development from like adjacent properties. And trunk sewer infrastructure is generally funded by what's called a trunk access charge. So at some point, if the city continues kind of down the road that we started down, we'll determine, okay, what do we estimate our entire truck sewer costs will be? How many connections do we anticipate will connect to that trunk sewer system? And that gives us a cost per unit. And that cost is generally collected at the time of connection. So if we go to the next slide, this is just kind of a trunk sewer line exhibit for our West Sewer District. The sewer lines are shown in pink there, and those lines would either be installed extra deep or at a larger size to serve adjacent properties. Go to the next slide. So now we're just going to kind of zoom in a little bit to the country court area. And we've had kind of our 2009 concept sewer plan. This plan is slightly revised based on current information. And so what this is showing is the conceptual locations of the sewer lines. It's showing there would be a temporary lift station kind of near the large wetland on the east side of St. Francis Lane. And when I say temporary, that lift station could be in service for 30 or 40 years. It really is all dependent upon the Prior Lake aggregate site and when the mining operations are finished on that site, and the timing for development of that site. But we've looked at the elevations, and the elevations that we're proposing to make a connection to the lift station in Savage would allow for gravity sewer flow from that point. And whenever the city can design a system with gravity flow, that's always much more desirable than relying on a lift station, because with lift stations, you have power outages, you have pumps that clog. They just generally require more maintenance. And cities will spend millions and millions of dollars to get rid of a lift station if they can. So again, we've looked at the elevations, and there would be an option, maybe 30 or 40 years in the future to remove that lift station and have gravity flow to our connection point in the city of Savage. This exhibit's also showing kind of schematically a lift station further to the south, kind of on the west boundary of the Franciscan Retreat property. That lift station would be permanent. That's kind of the lowest point of the area, and all the sewer flows from Whitewood and Birch would flow to that lift station, as well as if the Franciscan Retreat property ever sold, or the Tree Farm property and the adjacent smaller properties next to it. If they sold and developed, most of those properties would go to that lift station. That lift station would just pump it up a short distance then, and then there'd be a slightly oversized sewer pipe that would convey it to the temporary lift station.
What are the red circle numbers represent?
Those are just manhole numbers in
Okay,
our
all
drawing.
right, they don't mean nothing. Thank you.
Next slide. So with that, we did look at we kind of updated our preliminary cost estimates in February of this year. Just really for the Country Court project and anything that would be necessary to happen as kind of a precursor to that. And I guess what I want to point out here is that these costs are separated by in the future, if we proceed with this project, it'd be by kind of fund. But it's, the first line is streets and storm sewer. So about $4.7 million for the streets and storm sewer. That's really the lion's share of reconstruction of this neighborhood. And that's, right now, this is just a preliminary estimate. We don't have soil borings. We don't have a finished set of plans. And what I always say is, as we do more work, we can, we actually get to a point where we can actually estimate the quantities very closely. And when we estimate the quantities very closely, that improves the accuracy of our estimates. But I'm just assuming that there's not a lot of gravel underneath the existing roads. We have so much patches in there, and this also would include concrete curb and gutter in those costs. So, and then for the sanitary sewer, about 1.5 million of those costs would be for the sanitary sewer. It's also typical when sanitary sewer is extended, that water main is extended. And the estimated cost for the water main is $1,586,000. And then the lift station, so this would just be that lift station on the east side of St. Francis Lane. We would estimate $1 million for the lift station itself and for the force main that would convey the sewage to the connection point in the city of Savage. And then this next line, the trunk sanitary sewer connection and metering station. So this was a feature that we've been talking with the MPCA about, and the MPCA and the Met Council. And initially, what we were proposing, and this is based kind of on our last comp plan, was that we would make a connection to the city of Savage with a gravity line, bore and jack a pipe, jack a casing pipe, and push a carrier pipe underneath County Road 44, and then set a gravity manhole on the south side of 44, and that would be our connection point. Based on my most recent conversation with staff at Met Council, that may not be necessary right away if we don't expect the PLA property to develop. And so that would be a potential, that's something that we'll have to investigate further if we continue taking steps towards this project. But I just wanted to point that out. And then we have the trunk water connection to the city of Savage. So that, again, we have a cooperative agreement with the city of Savage, or a powers agreement, which allows us to purchase finished water from them, because they now have excess water because of the Burnsville interconnect. And so, but we still have to connect to their system with a pipe under County Road 44. That's usually an expensive connection because we have to jack a casing pipe, and then push the carrier pipe inside it, so that's. So with that, those will be the costs that we would anticipate, and all those projects, with the exception maybe of the $800,000 sewer connection, would be necessary to provide Country Court with sewer service. So with that, we wanted to talk about what we see as next steps. First and foremost, I think our goal is to answer any outstanding questions from council, maybe not tonight, but you know, if there's any questions that of things that council desires us to further explore, we can make a list of those, bring that back to a future meeting. At some point, we think it'd be a good idea to have another neighborhood meeting with the Country Court residents. We met with them a couple of years ago. We're probably overdue, but we also, you know, I don't know that we have a lot of new information to share with them now. And so I think we'd want to have some more discussion with the council before we hold that Country Court neighborhood meeting. Funding sources discovery, that would include looking at what grant projects or grant funding is available, state bonding funds, we've talked a little bit about that. And then review and update our capital improvement plan. So right now, these projects are kind of penciled in for 2028, 2029. If this is something that the council desires to move forward with, really, I don't think we've updated our capital improvement plan in the last maybe 2 years. And so updating that to go through the next 5-year term, and then asking the council to adopt that capital improvement plan. And then there's still a lot of steps that would need to be taken. Generally, cities adopt ordinances that talk about, just like a sanitary sewer ordinance, generally talks about what can be flushed down the drain, what can't be flushed down the drain. We'll need water ordinances. We need to, identify our financing structures. Whether or not we're going to have whack and sack charges. And then also talking about potential assessment policies. Right now, we don't have a formal assessment policy that would apply to this type of project. We have assessment guidelines, which we've applied very consistently for the past 10 or so years for road reconstruction projects, but we've not done a sewer and water project, and we don't have any guidelines to follow for that. So then the last step was to actually apply for funding. So, and with that, I believe that's the end of our presentation, and we will open up for questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Kate and Mary. Appreciate that. Council, questions, comments?
Yeah, we could go back to, I think it's page 58. No, 56, maybe 56. Please go through it a little bit more, the groundwater susceptibility and the wellhead protection area that you have.
It's the 2 maps that have the yellow and the.
Yeah.
So Scott County did groundwater monitoring, DNR. Yeah, geological atlas with DNR Department of Health. Yeah. So that looked at certain areas in the county, how are they susceptible to groundwater contamination. So that area where the yellow is on red areas in the county, it's usually sandier soils, so the water filtrates through there a lot faster. So that's a moderate one. The wellhead protection area, that is set by the Department of Health. That is, I believe it must be a public well for City of Prior Lake, maybe, or Savage. Yeah, so they do a wellhead protection area over that. So these areas they want more protected. So this Department of Health comes up with this, saying that this area look a little closer when you're there.
Yeah, so a lot of the wells in those neighborhoods are rather shallow. A lot of them run down, as I'm aware, to just above bedrock, which is somewhere between 70 and 100 feet through most of there. that. I guess my question is on that then, is there any, I know that it's, the well tests are private.
Mhm.
But does Scott County have any data on nitrate levels or anything else through that same area? In those neighborhoods?
I don't,
Are there any
exactly.
concerns?
I'll speak to that because actually I'm gonna, breaking news. Scott County, we just got a grant to, for groundwater. We're gonna put together an assessment. So we know, Scott County, we collect information from residents that do,
The water test.
the water test kits, right? So we
Okay.
collect all that information. We kind of know what areas are high in arsenic and nitrate. This area of Credit River is a little higher than the rest of the county for nitrate, a little bit. And that's expected with the sandier soils and the shallower well. So not too surprised. We are a little more concerned about the amount of arsenic that we're finding out throughout the county. But back to the breaking news. So we know that Scott County has the data from homeowners testing their private wells. We also know that cities have information that they've collected for whatever reason. They have a development that came in that's been doing some monitoring on how much impact they would have to quantity of water or quality of water. So with this grant that we've got, Scott County is going to be reaching out to the cities and saying, we would like to pull all of this information together, collect it, share it, and kind of analyze it, and then give it back to the cities so that they can see all the information that we have and they can kind of compare what other cities have. So that will be hopefully coming to you soon. And that's a little bit longer than what you needed for, yes, this area has slightly more high nitrates than other areas. But we would like to look at that closer, analyze it, and then give that data to the cities so you can see that.
Are any of those levels in that yellow area? High enough to cause concern for residents?
So the level of nitrate over 10 is the concern. And when we get that information, if a home is over 10, we would then contact them and work with them if they need to resample, put in a treatment system, work with them to see if we can figure out where the nitrate is coming from. Mostly that's a concern if there is an infant in the home, high nitrate. So a lot of homeowners, we let them know that they're high. We explain to them concerns that they may have, and they may or may not do something about it. If they don't have an infant in the home, they might say, okay, this is how we're going to approach it. So we don't make them, the county doesn't require them to do anything to address the nitrate. We just inform them of the situation.
So just to add to my question then, we have areas, you have somebody that gives you concern on their well, and where all these lots are so close together. Are you then contacting their neighbors to check their wells or not? Or is this just?
This is all voluntary.
Right.
And like I said, hopefully we can put a report together and then you can put that out on the Credit River website. We'll put it on the Scott County website and then people can go and look and see what's going on in their area. And hopefully
I mean,
if they see an area of high,
figure, one well that's testing high, that the neighboring well is probably 125 feet away from it or 100 feet away from it. It's probably
Yes.
drawing the same water.
yep, we do encourage, and we are sending out postcards now to residents, encouraging them to sample their water. Because yeah, maybe your neighbor's high or maybe your neighbor's not high, but that doesn't mean that your well isn't because of what you're next to. So we're trying to get the education out to people that they should be testing their wells.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, but I talked to, so I'll let other people go first.
So I have a question, coming in from a fiscal perspective. When we run through these numbers, and I understand they're complete estimates, we have a lot to understand. If the streets are in there, I see about $10 million among 100 homes. So we're telling the homeowners to spend $100,000 plus a water bill every month instead of working to find a different solution.
Actually,
That could be
if I can interrupt,
$40,000.
You're asking them also to pay to connect
Right,
and
that's another
to
part.
work their house in. So you're looking at an infrastructure cost of of $100,000 a house. But then you're also looking at whatever it costs to get the service into the house, reconfigure the house for that service, disconnect the well, and cap it, as well as remove the systems that they have
Okay,
and
so
connect it. So it's a lot more.
Okay, so, we talked about the assessment policy and guidelines, is there, what's the city's investment in this, because my understanding is, they can't take that cost if it's not improving their valuation. Is that a true statement? So cities then burden with most of that? How does that work?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Zento, cities can assess for the installation of new utilities. That does have a direct correlation to property value. You typically can meet what's called the special benefit test, which is measuring property value before and after the improvement. Pretty readily when you're talking about extension of new system services. We get into concerns about accessibility when we're talking about maintaining things that already exist and the cost of the maintenance project versus what it will do to value. But new systems versus value, typically, you can find a substantial value that you can assess.
Okay, so if we have $100,000 assessment on these houses, we think that they, or $100,000 expense that we put on these houses, we think that it would assess for $100,000 more.
The microphone does not want me to answer your question. Councilmember Zento, no, I'm not saying that. I can't say what the number is that could be assessed. Typically, a city would not. I guess maybe Shane knows better than me, but in my experience, $100,000 assessment on a residential home would be an extremely rare thing. And you'd be talking about assessing a certain portion of a project. For example, if the city were bonding, a bond requirement would be that you're assessing at least 20% of the costs. So you'd be looking at a $20,000 assessment to qualify for the bonding financing option. But I was not at all suggesting that you could assess 100% of the project.
So the city would pick up the rest? Or all the residents would pick up the rest? Not just
Yeah,
the
so-
country court?
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the options, right? I think the other option is we obtain grant funding, the city obtains grant funding to offset the cost, or state bonding funds to substantially buy that down. You know, it's still, no matter, I think, no matter what, it's gonna be an expensive project, not just for this neighborhood, but we have 3 other neighborhoods that also would probably, you know, they're in the next 20-year horizon for sure, maybe in a 10-year horizon.
But the 1,500 properties that aren't in those 4 subdivisions, they're gonna have to pick up some of the cost. Most likely,
Correct, yeah.
even if you're never gonna be benefited by it. Like the people that live south of 185th. Take me, for example, am I gonna pay for part of this?
Sure, so if the city applies the assessment policy that we have been applying consistently for the past 10 or better years, yes, the general tax base would pay for a percentage of the improvement cost. So
Yeah,
generally when we do road projects,
yeah,
if they're reconstruction projects, the city pays 40%, the residents pay 60%. For overlay projects, the city increases their contribution to 50%. And the reason for that was we wanted kind of to incentivize the overlay projects, because overall, we recognize a lower life cycle cost by constructing the overlay at the right time.
However, we could, in theory, I suppose, do like a subordinate service district like we have in our other CSTSs where we isolate the cost to the benefiting properties, or have a different assessment policy related to sanitary sewer and water is different from the roads, right?
Mr. Mayor, Council, I would recommend that in addition to the engineering technical approach to this, you also get a presentation from someone on finance, maybe that's Shane on another night or somebody else. But this is a big pill to swallow, but this isn't the first time it's come up. There are lots of pathways to to tackle this. Whether any of them are sufficient to meet your goals, I can't speak to, but I know that there's a lot of good information available about these questions. That is maybe an addition, a whole other package beyond the presentation you received tonight.
Perfect, thank you. And then Shane, another piece on the cost piece, the trunk facilities would also serve surrounding properties, not just Country Court, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So all 400, right? Yeah.
And or areas that to be developed around that area as well, right? So you have, you know,
Yeah.
you have probably, what is there, about 1,000 of acres of developable land on that side of 27?
Yeah.
Between you got a couple hundred that
Maybe not 1,000. but-
Nah. the gravel pit, yeah, PLA owns that whole bunch, the Franciscan land has a whole bunch, so you got the properties right there next to Country Course, so there's Tree Farm one, so there's developable land that also would be covered by the trunk facilities.
Yeah, there's definitely several hundred acres. I don't think.
Not quite 1,000. I can't remember when we did the comp plan, what that number was.
I think the 1,000 acres was.
That
The entire
district.
size of the West District, it was just over
Yes.
1,000 acres, and that's one of the criteria that the Met Council has in order to extend or
Mhm.
to. For it to become an interceptor.
Right. So not all those costs are immediate to the Country Court project.
Correct.
And can you go back to page 33 of 36? It's the map with the red. The trunks or the sewer concept, it says Country Court area sewer concept. When it goes all the way down south there, is that Country Court and the other one that's called
Down below the lake there?
yeah, Whitewood?
Yes.
Is that Whitewood too? So really,
Yeah.
it's Country Court and Whitewood that's incorporated in these costs, or just Country Court?
Just Country Court.
Well, okay,
So
So-
the reasoning for extending the viewport a little bit to the south was
Yeah.
to show that,
that's how you'd engineer it.
right, yeah,
Okay.
and so, Country Court would be kind of phase one, if you will, but that would have to happen before, Whitewood and Birch are served with sewer.
Okay, but the Whitewood and Birch costs are not in
That is
the numbers you gave us tonight.
No, but they would be a little bit less because you're not now boring underneath 160th Street. Some of that infrastructure is already built into that.
But you would have a lift station.
But you would have to break out that
Correct.
with.
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep. Yes, you were right, Abe, there'd be another lift station.
Mhm.
Again, you have 30 acres right there that could be developable, and then you'd have a whole bunch of new users on the system to help pay for that lift station as well.
Shane would have to come up with a magic.
Well, that's kind of the point of
Yeah.
doing the study of how many units can you get on it so that you can build out that access charge.
And then what's the difference between phase one Country Court and phase two Country Court? Is that just how number of homes?
Yeah, so with only having two entrances from County Road 44, my thought is that it would be a disaster to try to do this all in 1 year.
Okay,
You'd have to leave one entrance open, for residents to enter, and then,
Figure out.
and so my thought is that you do it over 2 years.
thank you.
We could do helicopter service, can't we? Get it all at once.
So I just to go back to the fundamental question, and I really appreciate the presentation, super helpful, especially for someone that's not a sewer expert like myself. We've got 5 homes. And we've got a bunch of older ones. Would it make sense if we're gonna take 80% of this cost? Would it be better to have another option to come back with and say, how can the city cover some of the extra expenses for some of these aging units and do that? I feel like we bypassed that question and went straight to, this is the only solution. Maybe I'm new or naive, I don't know, but I'd love to hear why we're jumping to that conclusion right now.
Councilmember Zanto, I would offer one thing, and that is that we know the roads have surpassed their useful life. So the roads need reconstruction, and really that's the most expensive part of this project. And really the question is, how much longer can we continue patching them and providing the expected level of service for residents? And then when it is time to reconstruct them, should we just be doing the roads, or at that time, should we also, that's the time to put the sewer pipes in and the water pipes in. So really the question is, when we reconstruct the roads, should we also be putting the sewer pipe in and the water pipe in to give these residents an option to connect to provide kind of a long-term solution for something that we think will become a.
But we wouldn't give them an option. I mean, you can't give them an option. If you brought all that in, we need every home to participate, so you couldn't.
Yeah,
give them options.
so I've seen different structures, right? And I think that's what Peter had referenced, of, we need some more meetings on this if the city's gonna continue going forward. So I've seen structures where there's been an assessment at the time of construction. And then there's also a connection charge. And maybe the city, gives them, maybe there's a time period where, maybe there's an ordinance that, you don't have to hook up right away, but you have to hook up within 2 years. Maybe that's 5 years. And the problem, or the flip side of that is we still have expense. We may have bonds that have bond payments, and so there's a lot to work out with that. But not all cities require property owners to connect right away. There's usually some amount of time, whether it's a year or 2 years or 3 years.
And I've seen that prior late, and when they start making their connections, pretty soon your neighbor says, you're gonna wait. Tear your yard up in, a few years, why don't we, it's all done.
Contractors are here.
Yeah, they're here, we get a deal if they're hooking up, it's a lot cheaper than, a few years down the road.
Well, question is, do you want somebody in 2 years digging into a fresh street
Yeah.
to make connections? Is there a time period for that? I mean, that's.
Mhm.
Well, they're generally stubbed it to the other.
Okay.
Right, the standard practice is to stub them to the right of way line,
Okay.
Let the water shut off.
so it's like 13, 15 feet behind the curb.
Yeah, so they wouldn't have to tear up the blacktop then.
Right.
But it's,
Backhoe that comes in to dig into the yard,
Yeah,
has to come on your street.
so you also look at some of these where you start to think, okay, yes, Abe, there's 5 now that are red dots right now, right? And likely to be more as the further you go into the future. I go back to the map with the exhibits of the setbacks and the houses and all that, and say, okay, if you have, and I don't know what the number is that are, but I can tell you this exhibit is part of one of those neighborhoods. It's not just a made up exhibit. It is actually one of the neighborhoods. And you start looking at how do you fit that 4,000 square foot drain field onto any of these properties? And if you can't cover them all that way, then is that the best solution to ignore it and let it go on and let people fend for themselves? Because then you run into the problem of marketability with homes. We already have, there's one home in one neighborhood where the septic mount is in the front yard. It takes up the whole front yard. It's halfway up the front door of the house. I can imagine that when that house goes up for sale, that people are gonna drive up and keep on going. And I've seen that happen, even with the ones that aren't in front yards, where people will pull up, they get out of the car, that people start pointing at the mound and they'll get back in the car and leave. So the marketability and value of these homes, well, it may not show on the, property tax statements or valuation statements that there's a valuation drop, but the marketability changes significantly when you have those in front yards, or again, yes, a house that has a cesspool that we know and there has a red dot today goes up for sale. Is a bank going to lend on that? I think that's probably where they, if most of those are found is when the bank requires those types of things and. You know, if there's not a solution, again, you know. Is putting a type 4 system everywhere the solution? You
It
know,
might be a more cost effective solution for the city.
if it,
Right.
if it's $100,000 at every house and these homes are worth, you know, between 350 and 425 in that area.
I don't think it's every house though. I think you've got a few of them that we're talking about. I agree with that. But we got a long ways to go to get to $10 million.
And if we don't start working on that sooner than later,
Oh, I'm not saying we don't,
Yeah.
I'm not saying we hire, put our heads in and take the.
no, I'm not suggesting you do it. I'm suggesting if we
Why are
need
we
to.
jumping to the solution as the only solution? I don't look at some other options.
Pete.
I just have one note to add. This is not my area, but in addition to what you're talking about right now, one of the reasons why this is a solution being looked at, pursued, studied, is historical. However, the currently constituted council chooses to evaluate, it's totally up to you. But the council, or your predecessor who adopted the comp plan actually set this in motion in your existing comp plan with the expectation of sewer and water and density coming to this part of the city. So as long as that's the existing comp plan, that's another reason why whoever made it, I don't know if they jumped to it or not, but that's what staff is working with now.
1977.
So, Steve, are you saying like, for instance, country corridor, that the city would step in and help somehow these folks put a septic in?
I'm saying, let's talk about options. I'm just talking fiscally. If the city steps in and helps 5 houses, and I know that's not real because 10 years from now, we have 5 more, I get that. But just fiscally, if we cover half the costs or 80% of the costs, we're still in a better spot to bring in $10 million worth of paying 8% as the city.
I come in a few years later, mine doesn't flush and we're gonna start going around doing this to every household in the city.
I'm just saying, let's talk about it, because if you have.
Why don't we do an inventory of the 88 house or the 99 houses and see how bad they are and how, do an inspection on all of them and see where we're at.
But even that's a point in the time, right? So the
It's a point in time.
But again, to Shane's point, the road project is something that, you know, if you.
It's been put off for
It's
20
been kicked,
years.
that can's been
Yeah.
kicked down the road for
Yeah.
many years because of.
Storm sewers are failing, they're backing up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the roads are the project that needs to happen and then it's, so it really becomes. That's the logical time. To make this something that they've known has been needed in these neighborhoods since, you know, for 50, 60 years now. This isn't a new secret. That this, you know, likely the far most efficient way to take care of the wastewater in these neighborhoods.
So, well, I agree with that, but we all know that once it hits there, it's going down the road until it gets all the way to Casey's. And now I'm sitting in Casey's and I don't want that because I do have enough space in there. And so I'm just adding caution to, are there other options we should look at? And to date, I haven't heard another option or why some other options aren't an option. That's all I'm asking about. I think that there's a couple houses on here that have newer septics. So now we're gonna burden those same houses that just put in a septic with this. Now, maybe shame on them for not asking when they bought the house, but at the same time, I don't think it's necessarily their responsibility to know everything about the city, and I just. It's a heavy burden to pay for someone. I would be,
You know,
Pretty
and not
agree.
every home in that neighborhood is on a half acre or smaller lot. I mean, I have almost 2 acres. I'll never need sewer. I have a new well. I'll never need it. I have plenty of places to put additional trench drains in my system. We put in new when we bought the place in 98. I know of, you know, I can see another neighbor in here who has at least an acre. And, you know, they'll never need it. I have a lot of neighbors in there that probably never need it. They're big enough. But there is an area, the Sewell Circle, And that area up on the top, on the south end of it, those lots are all back to back, they're small. And, you know, it's more the jigsaw puzzle of fitting drainage fields and everything else in between wells. And, you know, a lot of these things, they don't have a new well, and that was hence my question on what is what do we have for nitrate levels and arsenic in the area? In the new well that we put in sinks down a couple aquifers down, so we'll never need to worry about it, but I do have neighbors that have 80-foot wells and 70-foot wells. So that becomes a problem. There's some that in the bottom of that have even shallower wells. And we have a road now that the city just spent a bunch of money, which was long overdue, to overlay parts of it. But, you know, that's gonna last 5-7 years, maybe, depends on if we keep allowing 15 garbage trucks a week to drive on it, it's gonna grind it back up. So, you know, we have some things to think about there. I don't know that Country Court is the most dire of all of these. I think Casey Edition has bigger problems. But, you know, that's, if we're looking at bringing it down to that, where can we pick up something? You know, we're crossing through a whole bunch of areas that would then quickly develop, and my guess is that some pretty high densities. You know, that could help pick up the cost of that. My other question is, if we're owing a certain number of units to the Met Council for Credit River, can we have a little more comprehensive plan that figures out how to put most of it into this area? You know, where it could actually pay for it and maybe save a lot of these other parts of Credit River for a little larger lot developments instead of looking cookie cutter like the rest of the metro area. You know, that's some of the stuff that we should really be thinking about, and then develop a plan probably with some of the other property owners as well, so how they want to develop it.
I'm all in favor of that. I think we need to take a
We should go
holistic
slow.
approach of this.
I think that 2028 is really soon. I don't know that I'm not gonna say that everything that we're doing is wrong. I think we should be doing everything, and I think we should be doing a lot more with it. We should figure out how to pay for it. We should figure out if there are funds that can come in and pay for some of it. You know, to help development grants and things like that. But we should also start figuring out how to develop it and get it to all work where it kind of pays for itself as it goes. Because you're looking at $125,000 to $140,000 based on this is what it's going to cost people to hook up. You know, some of them are going to have their homes are designed with all their sewer growing out the back of the house. You know, they've either got to tear up their basement floor and poke it out the front, or they've got to pipe it around from the back of the house out to the front. They've got to do some, you know, there's a lot of other things that they have to do with their homes. And if you've got a $300,000 to $400,000 home, you know, putting $140,000 or $150,000 and then some interest on it, on top of that to carry some debt, you're not going to find anybody that says that increases the value of the home.
I just propose we have that finance meeting before we have the open house, so we have some better numbers that we can give the residents, even if it's a range.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I was just gonna suggest what next steps, let's talk about
Yeah.
next steps and next pieces
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
start covering, and that finance piece.
I know we don't want to do CSTSs anymore, but could we take the parks that are in these neighborhoods and use that land as a CSTS?
No,
No? Okay. I'm with Abe. I don't think we've done enough. I think we should do an inventory of all the houses, the 99 houses, and determine whether they can be salvaged for another 30 years, see what happens. But I don't know how much work that's involved in doing that, because there's alternatives that we were told tonight.
well, I mean, some of the other stuff that goes with this is, as Shane rightly says, we have an issue with streets. And streets they don't have a base under them. I mean, essentially, when they paved these, they ran a grader down and put a couple more piles of dump truck loads of dirt on, or gravel on the things, shaped them up, and then they paved over it, and then they ran a second course over it.
First they buried the trees in the first of all.
Right, well, and then they dug,
They
then they
did.
dug in a storm sewer system.
When it was done the second time,
They dug in some drain tile, which basically dumped it all into this little pond that's over on the right-hand side, which floods now 4 lots. You know, at the time that they did it, that thing was pretty small. And, you know, there's no engineering and how much water went into it. And there's no outlet to this neighborhood. So, you know, if we go and, you know, actually, that's the other thing that we don't know is that if we make improvements to the drainage system in here, the storm sewer, that we just briefly talked about doing a storm sewer system in here. The question is, how many homes are we gonna flood down below with that? Because there is no outlet for this.
I have an outlet easement in place for that.
Yeah.
pond.
Okay,
There is.
with Pearson?
Pearson's.
Yeah, and that was part of the deal we cut when we did that.
It's been approved
So,
10 years ago. So yeah.
but we need to actually think about that, because patches that we did over the last 2 years, quite a bit, they're not gonna last forever.
All right. So just actions for staff to work on then. I'm hearing, let's work on, some more of the finance piece, what are some of our communities do around, assessment policies between rates, assessments, connection fees, for financing. How do we isolate that from funding from, again, general fund and the rest of the community? Potential grant pieces. I know there's some of these that, what's out there for options and pieces like that. What else, Shane? What else should we detail before we set a time for meet with country court?
Well, I think, just identifying, we could just outline some steps that would need to be taken before, we could provide our first home with sanitary sewer service, and we can, make kind of a list of steps and just work on those steps.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, can we send Lucas our specific questions just to make sure that they get answered?
I'd also propose that we look at the 100 lots parcels and see which one of them do or don't have access to. Because if I was a resident, I come to this country court neighborhood meeting, I'd say, I don't have one of these, why am I getting lumped in here, just like Jay said, right? So I think it'd be very valuable to say, of our 100 parcels, 33% of them have no option, or 50%, and so we can help explain why there's.
Yeah, then you have a reason to go forward.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know that we have the ability to do that. I mean, in order to, I'm not aware of any government body that has basically went on everybody's property and completed that inventory. And maybe, I don't know.
So are you asking something different though?
Wouldn't we have
Like you're just looking at like just lot size, right?
lot size and where the existing septic and well is?
I don't know if we have existing.
Mayor and council members. So I've been thinking about your question. So Scott County staff, we don't have the capacity to go out and do compliance inspections for each of the lots in these subdivisions. However, I do know that there are some like lake owner associations that have wanted to get a sewer line around their lake because they felt that the septic systems were impacting the lake water quality. So I know that there's others that have done it. So I wrote a note to Mary and I to go and research this, and then whatever we can find, email you. I know others have done it.
Like a contractor that goes out and
Yeah,
or
it
an
would have to,
inspector.
yep, it'd have to be a third party
Yeah.
contractor, like those that do those compliance inspections.
yeah.
That takes a lot of time to get to all of those homes and look at the tank and look at the drain field. But I think the number one obstacle, like Shane says, is access to the property. That doesn't mean they're going to let you onto their property. And as soon as they find out that there's a compliance inspection done, it has to be turned into the county. If it fails, yep,
Just
we're
show 'em
gonna
a
make them
$100,000
replace.
bill.
So,
Stay here. You want $100,000 bill or do you want us to come on your property? Take a
right,
look
so
at-
something that you'll have to, I'm sure others have dealt with it.
Yeah.
We have not dealt with it. I know others have dealt with it and they've gotten the homeowners to do the compliance inspection. I'd have to look into it. So this
Okay.
isn't the first, others have done it. We'd have to look into it. But that the number one thing is getting the homeowners to let you on their property,
Yeah.
because
Does
if
the
it
county
fails, then they're on the hook to replace. And if you're not gonna provide that option to them of an out, they might resist that. Yeah.
Does the county have wellhead locations? That are fairly accurate or not?
The exact location of the well on a property?
Yeah.
No.
There's a layer in GIS, but it just drops
It's
off the
just basically
property.
dropping on property.
Some of
I've
them
seen
have
some.
verified, so some of them are close, but not everyone, and they're not exact, so.
Well, would it make sense? To actually, do a survey or at least do a survey of. At no cost to the property owners, to at least locate. Where these things are. And I would guess that, not a compliance inspection, but essentially just. Get a location, a mapped location of wells. And of septics and drain fields, et cetera, where these things are on the property, so that. If we were to be able to look at it a little closer, then we could see if there were options of squeezing things into those or not. Because if you have that, I mean, some of the other options of possibly doing this are maybe even doing a larger community well. That goes deeper, it gets out of the area, out of the layers where we have higher nitrates, that we could drop something down deeper and serve like 5 or 6 homes. Just, not necessarily a full community well, but there are options, to do that, because, we're looking at either eliminating wells, which would, if we did eliminate wells, then we would have more room to put more options for drain fields and things like that, and then provide a water service. But if we do that, then we're still gonna dig up the street, install water lines and do all of that. So it's just, I mean, if we wanted to try to find other solutions, because for the most part, we could even bypass country court if we could figure that out to do other development and come back and do country court 30 or 40 years from now.
Except for the streets.
Except for the streets,
You're right.
except for the streets.
Jay, back when we started the community, or subordinate service districts, we were advised strongly to stay away from a community well.
Right,
So,
but they do work.
oh,
Mm.
yeah, they work out there. They've pounded a couple new ones into it.
But they-
$500,000.
High nitrates and all kinds of other problems that they run into.
So-
Yeah. And again, I think. Abe, you were asking like physical size of looking at property, right? And that sounded to me like more your question was around,
Yeah.
percentage of properties that wouldn't fit. Right? So you look at, just looking at this map again of country court, and you can see all these ones that are down by the Franciscan.
Problem.
They're clearly too small, comparatively to some of those things. I mean, I guess that's all GIS work could be done if you knew square footage of lots comparatively, compared to, again, you look at, Jay's and a couple up and around his house and one in the middle, but the rest of them all look relatively all smallish.
And the townhouses and
The
fourplex.
fourplex over here. So you got some other issues there.
Right.
But then the problem becomes, then you almost have to do that all the way down, because again, this is kind of the first piece to get to the next neighborhoods too. And if you have homes in all these other neighborhoods that don't, and I know there's a lot of them. I know some of my neighbors where they step out the backyard, that's where the mound starts and ends at the property line. So it literally takes their whole backyard. So even, it's more of that becomes the issue of lot size and space, because a treatment site takes space. Even with the type 4 system, it's hard to get around needing space. Okay,
I just feel like we're gonna have another instance where we go to the public and they're gonna come in here and say, now you're saddling us with all this debt, we don't have any kind of response to them other than, well, we just have to. That's what I'm trying to get around. I want to be able to say, we've done our due diligence, we understand your concerns, we understand the cost. And
Well,
here's why.
The
And I don't-
difference is now we have a little better estimate. Because a couple of years ago, when we did have a meeting with the neighborhood, the numbers were much less than 100,000 and 100, they were definitely a lot less. So, but at the same time, it was also said, we don't know what they are. But I mean, now we have a roughed in plan. And where lift stations need to be and some things like that. So I think now we are understanding cost a little bit more, and it's 10 million for 100 homes is a lot.
Counselor Sauterbach, to that point, I think the costs today or estimated this year are about 30%, maybe even closer to 40% higher than when we initially
It's about 5
penciled them
years
into
ago.
our capital improvement plan.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's because we've seen some really rapid inflation and construction costs have risen pretty substantially over the last 5 years.
Are these 2028 costs you put in your analysis tonight, or are they current costs?
2025.
So they're gonna grow 5% a year. Roughly.
Yeah, so
Hopefully only
put some
5%.
contingency on there for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right,
I mean, it looks like a good plan, right? As far as it's the way it's designed, it looks efficient for how you're, 'cause I do know how that neighborhood lays. The only question is, I guess, you're gonna have to spend a little bit more time with the storm sewer, figuring out, make sure that works and like, because, timing of that is also, the outlet would be through there. It's a pretty big hole right now.
Right, and a lot of those, I mean, quite frankly, are, final design type items. I do have storm sewer estimated in the cost estimate. And there's several $100,000 in cost for new storm sewer. But nothing to, construct an outlet, a permanent outlet across the Prior Lake aggregate property. That's something that probably is pretty feasible once the mining is complete. At this point, it's not feasible. And one point also, I think we've reported back, maybe in the weekly notes, but we met with the property owners of the Prior Lake aggregate property last summer, and at that time they said they're not planning on developing this property for 30 or 40 years. So they have 30 or 40 years of mining aggregate before that property will be converted to a development.
Yeah, hence my question, why are we in such a hurry to go into that neighborhood? Probably to look at some of the other ones.
because the roads need to be done.
Yeah, I know.
Can I make another suggestion? We had in here the Savage neighborhood that was done in the 2000s.
Mhm.
Have we had any conversations with Savage to understand how they went about it and how the neighborhoods handled that, what the strategic position was and how they got funding and things of that nature?
It was quite expensive.
How did they do it? I'd love to hear that.
Anybody even works at Savage anymore that was there at that time?
Yeah.
Could have been, was Mark McNeil might have been the,
Or are there other communities? that are
Administrator
going
at the
through this?
time.
There's gotta be other communities, so I think rather than us just going down the path and trying to figure out, let's ask some questions.
all right. Kate, Mary, thank you.
I have another possible alternative source of funding that is kind of related to what I just listened to, that would take me a minute.
Well, actually, I hadn't intended taking public comment on this one here tonight. This is just more for council information tonight, so. Wayne, send us a note, that's the best way to contact council on that stuff anyways, so.
Yeah, it's just, there's $1 million bond from the aggregate. If the water quality is affected by us, so they've got a big bond to help out.
Perfect.
So-
Send us a note. All right. We'll move on to general business. General business number one. So at our last council meeting, I added this one to the agenda here tonight.